So we're now recording. So I would like to introduce our coordinator for persons with disability, and that is Patty Orger. Patty's been with us. She started in December, I believe. And, you know, with the exception of kind of getting to know this ministry and getting to know a little bit about how the diocese works and some of our parish communities, most of her experience has been during pandemic. But she has done an amazing job. I think I'm cutting out again. Let me wait a second. Okay, hopefully I'm up and running now. So I'll say this real quick. She's done an amazing job. She's going to show you the website that she's been working on and the many different ways that she's been doing with partnership. One of the exciting things, and Patty will also share her journey and her story, but one of the exciting things that Patty brings to us is also a great amount of experience of employing persons with disability. And next month is a month that we recognize employment opportunities for persons with disabilities. So amongst some many other things, Mental Health Month and other things. So I'm going to turn it over to Patty and Charlene for the remainder of the presentation until 11 o'clock.
All right. Thank you. So thank you all for joining us today for this presentation. Every family is unique. Some have greater needs. And a special thank you to any participants from other dioceses in Iowa that have joined us today. We are certainly glad that you are here. This webinar has been sponsored by Iowa Press and our presenters from the National Catholic Partnership on Disability. If you do have any questions that pop in your mind during this presentation, please feel free to post those in the chat box and we will try to get to those at the end of the presentation. And as John mentioned, we are recording this presentation, so those that can't join us live can access it at a later date. And then after the presentation, John will be posting it on the Diocese YouTube page for private viewing. And then we'll also be posting it on the Disability Ministry webpage that I will be showing you at the end of the presentation. And just a little bit background on me. The reason I guess I am qualified, I'm not sure if I'm qualified for this position, but my background is I have my son Jeremy, who has disabilities. He has cerebral palsy and he has a multiple different types of disabilities due to him. And I was driving to work at DMAC one day when I heard the job posting on Catholic radio. And I thought to myself, I'm not sure this is anything I need to be doing right now in my life. I'm trying to slow down. And then I thought, well, if you are thinking there might be things that we can improve in our Catholic diocese and churches to more engage people and offer opportunities for faith growing for people with disabilities, maybe you should be willing to be one of those persons to step up and do something about it. So I applied for the position and they offered to me, and I've been learning so much since I got this position. I never even heard of NCPD before I got this position. So I was excited to see all the resources out there and the great things available. So with that note, it is my privilege to introduce our presenter today. Charlene Katra is Executive Director of National Catholic Partnership on Disabilities. And welcome to Charlene, and thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Patty. It's a pleasure to be here. We'll have to talk more later. Our stories have some parallel paths there for sure, how God works in lives in mysterious ways.
Right.
If I can go ahead and start sharing my screen now, correct?
Correct.
Very good. You guys make sure that you're seeing the right thing you need on your end.
Looks good.
Okay. Trying to get mine. Sorry, bear with me just so I get mine back up the way I wanted it. All right. Now you're still seeing full screen? Excellent. Okay. And I think at this point, Patty, I think you were going to lead us in prayer, correct?
Correct.
Very good.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Spirit of God, present among us your grace with abilities that we freely share in hopes of building up your kingdom on earth. All ministry, the disability ministry, is your ministry. We thank you and praise you for every opportunity to serve your people, especially those very beloved by you, persons sometimes overlooked or invisible in the world. We ask for your blessings and guidance on our humble efforts to accompany persons with disabilities and their families within the full life of the church. Thank you for ministry leaders who, through their sincere love and acceptance of the entire body of Christ, are transforming the world we live in, one diocese, one parish, one family at a time. May the blessing of God be upon us, giving us knowledge to guide us, courage to support us, and always love to unite us. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and the Holy Spirit, now and forever. Amen.
Thank you, Patty. Okay, so again, our title for today is Every Family is Unique, Some Have Greater Needs. The whole idea that, you know, I always say this about parishes too, you know, right? Every parish is not created equal. So whether it's resources or space or, you know, a variety of staff and, you know, print resources, live resources, so many changes from one to the next. But yet, obviously, there's a commonality as well. So families, we look at families, and especially in light of the pandemic this year, and talk about how do we accompany those families who do have greater needs, okay? And there are, I would say statistically, that number is growing. And so it's very important, and I'm very grateful for your time to focus on this topic today. There's a lot more every parish can do. Our families need our support. And so when we talk about what are the dictums of today that make accompaniment more challenging, yet still morning. But I always want to start too with posing a little reflection question for you. So as you listen to me, and maybe hopefully if you have questions, you can pose those back to me via the chat, as Patty mentioned. But post-pandemic, now it sounds like in your area, some of you are fortunately already able to come back and have some in-person to person meetings. That's wonderful. So you might be ahead of the game than other parts of the country. But post-pandemic, which I know we still know it's got a ways to go. It's not over for sure. How might you imagine your ministry being more inclusive? Okay, so how could you better accompany some families, individuals with disabilities, and of course the families that love them and support them? So that's your question to kind of keep in the back of your mind, if you will, for us. I never talk to people without talking about language. Language is very important. For individuals who have different diagnoses and disabilities, they'll often know how well versed you are in their lives or circumstances by words you say and words we maybe print in our bulletins or in our diocesan newspapers. These things are very important too. They send a message. The language even may be used on your own websites. And that's a kind of a note to self already. Make sure if a parent looks on your website, not just a diocesan website, certainly that one too, but even on parish websites. I've been in meetings with parents where they'll be in the room saying, I'm looking at the parish website and I don't see anything that tells me they'll take my child in their faith formation program, etc. So that's another just kind of note to self. So how do we refer to the disability community? The current best practice is referred to as people first language. But before I get to that, I'm going to tell you a real quick story about a man I met years ago at a National Catholic Conference for the Disability Ministry. His name was Henry, and Henry had no forearms. And the night I walked into the conference, when I got there, he was presenting on a panel. And everybody on the panel of 3 or 4 individuals had different diagnoses or disabilities. His was a physical disability, right? But his story was that 25 years earlier than the day I met him, he had been a supervisor of a machine shop, and the machine shop was one that cut steel. So in his mid-20s, when this accident happened to him, he had an employee come and tell him that the machine was malfunctioning. Now, it's a bit of a gruesome story, as you can probably already imagine, to start our morning with. I apologize. But it was his story. It was the reality. So when the employee said the machine was malfunctioning, of course, as the manager, he went to check out the machine, which unfortunately, once again, did malfunction. And that's how he lost his forearms in his mid-20s. Now, I meet Henry. He's in his early to mid-50s. And in that presentation, in that brief time of his sharing, he referred to himself as a very, very dated term that most of people on this call may not remember or know of. Anybody have any idea back 30, 40 years ago what an old term would have been for someone with a disability? Think about it. I don't know if you can put it in the chat, but I'll tell you what it was. It was GIMP. So the word GIMP is what he referred to himself as. Well, I knew at that moment I would never refer to Henry as a GIMP. And luckily the next day I got to sit next to him in a small group session and talk to him afterwards. And so we visited about this idea of language and how much it's changed over time. But what he told me was helpful, that's why I try and share with others. About every 5 years, it seemed, in these 25 years of Henry's life, you know, from accident to when I met him, the language, the vernacular in the world had changed around the culture of disability. So what it went from, usually I have a big whiteboard and I let you shout out things and write it down, but for virtual, I'm just going to kind of tell you the information, the stream of the progression. It went from GIMP to crippled was next. 5 years later, handicapped. You still hear that more than I'd like, but so that one's still out there. Then it went to, what is the most common one you know right now today? It's disabled, right? So you've gone from GIMP to crippled to handicapped to disabled. Now we've gone 20 years. Now I'm going to bring you up to 2020, right? So in 2020, we refer to people first language or person first language, which just means I'm always going to put Henry or myself or whomever before any diagnosis or disability. That's why it's called person first language. So Henry has a physical disability, okay? Charlene has autism or a diagnosis of autism, if you want to say it that way. Or even better, Charlene lives with autism or a diagnosis of autism, because we still have fully functioning, vital lives. So we want to emphasize the positive, and we want to always put that descriptor after. And the other last way I say to people to kind of remember this is I talk about the traffic. Sometimes when you're traveling, you will check the traffic to see which way to go. Why? Like I said, I moved to a big city now. I came from a very big city, Houston. We were always checking the traffic report on the television or the radio en route to places. Why? Because if there was a car that was, and this is typical usage for the traffic report, a disabled vehicle. Well, in that context, what does disabled connotate? I'm sure some of you could say off some of the words I'll say. Broken down, in the way, problem, right? Not working. These are all words that we would say, and then for that situation, it's fine, doesn't bother me in the least. But from my Catholic social justice teachings of the dignity of the person, I cannot refer to a person as disabled, okay? So to me, they're a person with a disability, or better yet, if I know their diagnosis or etc. descriptor, it comes after who they are first, as that child of God. Okay, so that's the main thing to try and remember. And don't feel bad if you know, some of us grew up hearing handicapped all our lives. That's what the word that was common when we were younger. We might still say it occasionally. And the last piece on this is people will say, well, what do we do about signage? Because if you have an opportunity, and you in leadership do, to update signage on your properties, then the signage needs to go from what's still commonly seen, handicap parking or handicap restrooms, change it to accessible. It's an accessible restroom, it's an accessible parking space, okay? Again, you're respecting the dignity and you're trying to move us past some of the older dated terminologies. So that's my tip for you on language. Whoops, went the wrong direction, my apologies. Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about barriers, because in every campus, we're going to have barriers. It's inevitable. Some of those barriers will be physical. Physical barriers is obviously, for someone in a wheelchair, that is insurmountable. So we pray there's an elevator nearby, or a chair rail, maybe that can, something up the chair that they can sit in and be taken up a set of steps. That's a physical barrier. But the other one that honestly is harder to remove on parish campuses is the latter, is the attitudinal barriers. Okay, so we can more easily remove a physical barrier than we can an attitudinal barrier. Why? Because the attitudinal barriers really are, conversion is needed, right? And I have always said, if you really want conversion, which every parish does for their faith community, then get people with disabilities like Henry and others involved in the full life of your church, because God uses them to create that conversion in others' hearts. Okay, so it behooves us to make that body of Christ really be complete by making sure that we're not missing anyone. And sometimes it is hard to see who's not there sometimes. That's why as leaders, we have to talk about these things and really try and pursue some creative outreach to reach those who are marginalized and who, as I say, have greater needs. And the reason I say greater needs, quickly on that note, it goes back to language as well. Some people use special needs. I and others I know, some of us are not a fan of special needs because your needs are special for you, mine are special for me. All by virtue of, again, our dignity of the person, our needs are all special. So what I say is that some families and some individuals have greater needs. To me, I think that says it more accurately, and it's takes you away from some of the, I think sometimes where people feel pity for someone. That is not what someone needs or wants. Okay, we need empathy, we need compassion. A quick question for you. We were going to do a little poll. I've got 3 questions in this presentation. So just to kind of engage you a little bit in your own guessing for these answers. Again, I know you have the option if you wanted to write something in the chat, if you want to guess how many children have a diagnosis of autism. What do you think is the current stat right now? You know, it's changed a lot since I started in this ministry 20 years ago. Unfortunately, it's been on the rise. So I'll give you a minute to just kind of think about that. Autism has a lot of unique characteristics, but the reason they say autism and autism spectrum you'll hear a lot is because there is such the gamut of where someone might be and what characteristics or symptoms they may exhibit, though there might be some similarities, and we'll talk about those in a minute. So here's your answer. Okay, currently it's 1 in 59 children have a diagnosis of autism. You know, once upon a time it was 1 in 110. Once upon a time it was 1 in 60. You see how much smaller that number is getting as far as that ratio. So the prevalence has been rising. We know more and more people now, unfortunately, also getting a little too common, I'd say. Several families, I know several, who have multiple children in their family who all have a diagnosis of autism. Used to be common, it was getting more common 5 years ago to know of families that might have 3 or 4, believe it or not, children of their maybe 5 or 6 children who may have a diagnosis. We have one person on our board currently who I met since I came to this position in December of 2019, who has 6 children, all of whom have a diagnosis of autism. There's not an answer to the question about the why question, but I'm just letting you know that this is what is kind of beginning to be an unusual truth, okay? Temple Grandin, this is just a picture of someone who's very internationally known as a self-advocate for someone who has a diagnosis of autism. You see her quote here about her mind being, she's a visual thinker, not language-based. So this is not something that you would typically, in some of our catechetical ways, think of giving them a book to read from or things like that. Or she will need to maybe see it in another way. Maybe see a scripture verse role played maybe when she was younger. Maybe it would be, you know, puppets if she was very young. It's going to be, that would engage her more than a printed text. So she's not language-based, and her mind is like Google Images. That gives you an idea of how she sees the world. Okay, so that's just it could be a similarity in others we serve with autism. And the quote at the bottom, I think, is very important for educators to see. Okay, when she was not able to talk, because when she was younger she wasn't, what would she do out of basically frustration? She would scream. So think of the child that you may have seen, and I say children of God when I say child, all ages, not just meaning K through 8. Could be a 24-year-old. I mean, but it still might have some behaviors that are more remedial in their processing or delayed processing and whatnot. Or if they're not able to, again, speak out loud like you and I. We're in their frustration sometimes of not being able to stay in a seat or perform a task or finish a task. They may just verbally. The thing to remember is all behavior is communication. That's the adage. All behavior is communication. So they're telling you something. It behooves us to pay attention to even the things that sometimes might seem a little unusual for us. Slow down enough to be patient and try and understand that they're trying to communicate with you. Trust me, every parent who has a child with a disability who has different behaviors, they know what their child is communicating, what their child wants and needs, okay? Might be a little harder for us because we're not with them as often, but behooves us, again, to try and work towards knowing them better. Again, I said it's a spectrum disorder. No two are alike. A couple tips that usually help as far as structure goes, and that's key, and that's good, because typically a catechetical class will have a routine of, you know, you might start with a blessing or a scripture verse and prayer or certain routines before you get into some of the activities that engage them further. And again, maybe even the book ending with prayer on both ends and whatnot. So as long as that routine is kept, that helps lower anxiety. So someone with autism may live with unusually high levels of anxiety more often than probably any of us have typically done in a moment, but they might live like this very regularly. So for them, the more the routine stays the same, environments being uncluttered, you know, calm begets calm. So if we're calm with them, right, versus sometimes you see on the news, we had a recent incident, I know, that was made national news, where someone was really shouted at and worse, actually. Well, that doesn't de-escalate, it escalates situations. So we want to be people that can be an ally to the family and to help de-escalate a situation if there's one, or even on the verge. Stop it before it starts, right? Be proactive. So use less words. So sometimes instead of, do you need more time to do this task? Or if you're a parent, to clean a room, you may just say, more time. You see how much easier that is for someone who has language processing delays to be able to understand what you're asking them than a whole sentence full of words. So using words and pictures, we're going to talk about the value of using pictures in just a minute. Another adage to remember is they need twice as much time to do half as much work. I hope you really read that twice. Need twice as much time to do half as much work, right? So if you have 8 questions you need somebody, the group to answer, you might only require of them 4. Or if you give everybody 10 minutes, maybe you give them 20. Again, one way or the other, adjust that for that learner if they need that accommodation. Again, there might be some unusual behaviors, seemingly unusual behaviors. Do not take it personal. Again, it's just part of how their brain operates, and every brain is different. And that's a good thing, okay? Okay, here's our little, again, prayer hands to teach the word amen for someone, again, who may not be able to say it out loud. That's a very usual best practice, is to teach someone to make prayer hands so that when they go up for communion, when they're going to be confirmed, that would be their sign that they're saying amen. Okay, so visuals. The other benefits of visuals, I'm going to read a few to you. And these can be, obviously, visuals can be adjusted by, you know, age and appropriateness. Visuals are permanent, okay, where our words, what? They disappear. They help prepare someone for transitions. So they know now we need to be quiet, or we're going to get in line, or we're transitioning to a music. If you hold up a music note, or people singing. So again, I go back to that language processing. Those visuals allow them time to process what is being said. So they're hearing it, they're seeing it, and hopefully you're giving them the time to process. They can see what you mean. They're transferable. So you could literally give something assigned to someone and they could take it with them to their next activity or their next location they're supposed to go to. They're neutral. I like this one. There's no mood or attitude about them. Remember how we talked about attitudes? Well, sometimes even in our, you know, maybe worst days, it might show on our face. You know, we all have kind of the comic, you things you see, on Facebook these days about, my face. It's hard for my face not to show what I'm thinking or feeling. We don't realize sometimes how true that can be. So these are neutral. They build independence. And anytime you ask an educator or a parent, what do you want for this person? Do you want them to be independent or dependent? Everybody's going to say independent. Are we doing things to help them, set them up for success to be independent? It reduces that anxiety I talked about, because again, they know what they're supposed to do and where they're supposed to go, etc. And truly, it helps all learners. I often say what is needed for someone with some of our individuals with greater needs is really good for everybody. It does no harm anyway, so it's win-win. Okay, so think about that. Do what you need for those individuals who have a greater need, and know that it may be a blessing for others as well. All right, one more little quick question for you. How many children live daily with sensory processing challenges?
Go ahead and put your answer in the chat, and I'll see how well you're guessing.
Okay, let's try it. I'll talk for a minute and let's see if they can do that, okay? And just so you know, while you're thinking about, well, maybe you say, what is sensory processing challenges? We're all sensory beings. Right now, I'm sitting in this chair. I feel the back of my chair. I see the sunlight coming in from one side of my window. I have fluorescence above me. I'm here. I heard Patty's voice. I mean, you can think right now, you may have a fan on you. You may hear a car go by. We're all sensory beings. So the brain, in its amazingness, is always taking all this information in, and it has to quickly be able to process all this information. Now, when your brain is working at optimal levels, I would say, we're able to kind of sort out what's important, what's not important, and stay focused, okay? So for most of us, most of the time, certainly not all of us, all of the time, we're able to do that. But when someone has a brain that has some difference, that what I describe it is, it's almost as if you had 8 people wanted to go to a diner, and 8 cars drove. Instead of going to 8 different diners, they all showed up at that one diner at the same time. So they can't control and differentiate all those different stimuli. It's all coming at them at once. And oftentimes in this person's brain, all of those things may also be very accentuated. So the sounds are louder, the feeling of even clothes on my skin may be irritating. Everything is overly sensitized, either overly or under. It can go either way. But more often what we see when we see people kind of, I would say, responding to a challenge is that it's too much. They're having, the lights are too much, the air is too much, too hot, too cold, etc. All right, let's see what I think a few of you wrote some answers there. The answer is 1 in 6. 1 in 6. How'd they do, Patty?
One person got it right, so.
All right, excellent. Yeah, you wouldn't maybe think it would be that high. I don't know if the other guesses were in which direction, but 1 in 6 is a pretty big number to think about when you think about a group of, let's say, 15, 20 people in front of you in a classroom. That, again, statistically, I usually say 3 to 5% of people, or 3 to 5 learners in front of you may have some disability or diagnosis of some form or fashion. And when I say disability, I'm usually putting 4 of them under the umbrella. I'm putting physical, intellectual, behavioral, or emotional, are usually the 4 kind of categories under the big umbrella of disability. So again, now sensory processing, again, is clearly affecting them, behaviorally, but it's also an emotional thing too, because they're trying to sort through, all this processing that's happening, this traffic jam in their brain. So the traffic, it gets tied up. But sensory processing abilities, you need to know, they assist us in social interactions. They assist us in fine and gross motor skills. So from texting to riding a bike, and also focusing and paying attention. Here's a little graphic to kind of show you quickly some of the things that someone in front of you might be challenged with. I often have parents say that they really sometimes have to have a private person, and this was before the pandemic, come to their home to cut their child's hair, because that was almost an overwhelming traumatic experience to have someone cut their hair. be that close to them, to touch their hair, literally to do this for them. But you can see a lot of different other things on there. Like I mentioned, having trouble focusing or concentrating, the challenges with foods, right? Where does that come into it regarding our faith? What's the application for someone who has trouble with, they're a picky eater and they resist new foods and textures? Well, it would be First Communion and Holy Communion for us, you know, the second, the third, the fourth, you know, et cetera, communion they receive. How is that? That's why you have to practice with unconsecrated host, right? With this community, it's a must. That helps them because they're not gonna take to something new quickly or easily. And so again, when you're trying to set them up for success at that first celebration, as well as all the others after that, let them practice with the unconsecrated. And remember, even the smallest chip of the host, a consecrated host, once they're once they receive the sacrament, and even in that initial time, no less Jesus, right? Even if it's just the chip of the consecrated host, no less Jesus, if that's all they can actually tolerate. And you always base it on the real need, not just, oh, just because. And we always catechize to the best of our ability, using some of the great new resources, and Loyola Press is with us today, that are really writing and speaking directly to this community today. They weren't when I started in this ministry years ago. Now all the publishers and some, Loyola Press has always really been a front runner for this community in coming up with some things that are very multisensory and helpful in teaching them the faith. So, you know, again, we'll hear from them a little bit more later. Now, a solution to some of these challenges that someone has as far as sensory processing is what? They need something to do with their hands, because when they have something to do with their hands or other body parts can be moving, it helps them focus. I always say movement is good for the brain, right? So we want to give people some opportunities to move in either small or large ways. Fidgets in particular, we call them fidgets, and they look like what? They look like toys, but they're not toys. They're tools. So these tools are necessary for some of our youth, especially those that are challenged with sensory processing disorders, right? They need something to focus on. The one in the picture there is this one. I keep it on my desk. In my old office, my secretary always came in and picked this up and played with it when she was in talking to me. We all have different things that we might use. Years ago, I was in the legal field. What do you think adults often do? Without even thinking about it. The pen, clicking the pens, you bet. So now the problem was when I was in the legal field, we were videotaping depositions. Quick story. So what was the solution to a group of attorneys around conference tables, all clicking pens when you're trying to record the deposition? We put out rubber bands on the table. So they inevitably would pick up rubber bands and just kind of play with a rubber band. And it put the noisy clicking of pens away without them even realizing we did that to solve the problem. Again, wasn't really working with people with disabilities, so to speak. It was just a natural instinct for someone to do when they were trying to concentrate. It was an unconscious behavior, so to speak. So these kind of things of giving people things like this, here's another one here, I'll just hold it up where somebody might want something soft, somebody might want something hard to kind of, a little more bristly. There's a lot of different things you can use. This also sits on my desk. It's just kind of a little wheel with beads in it that just kind of spins. Now this one goes very slowly. Like I said, some people want something slow. Some people might need something to alert them. So some are for calming, some are for alerting. And of course, the original fidget, right? So don't forget our rosaries. Pass these out. This is ideal. Lean into what we have and already is part of our faith that we're teaching. So pass out the rosaries, and of course the original fidget spinner has to go on that list too, right? Real quick, I always show Velcro. Sometimes it's just something you already have in your workroom. You don't even have to go buy something. And the thing about Velcro, people say, why Velcro? Well, what you would do is underneath the bottom of someone's desk or chair, well, table if you're at home or whichever, but there's a soft part and then there's a rough part of Velcro, right? And remember how I said different people are going to seek out different needs. So if someone likes things soft, you just put the little soft side up underneath. Where again, you want to also set them up to where socially it's more appropriate for them to be just fiddling under, so to speak, with rubbing either something rough or soft under the lip of their desk where no one even sees it. Remember the dignity of the person. So they get teased and bullied a lot already because some of their behaviors are unique, right? So as much as we can do things that might help them attend without drawing attention to them as being someone that someone else would want to bully. Okay, so those are things to keep in mind. A few other ones on here just to know about. A small mini trampoline in the corner of a room, or if there's a low, I always say either create a corner of a room or have a little bag of tricks. Here's just the rubber topper that goes on. Now it's a really heavy rubber designed and sold to be put on tops of pencils. For those people who otherwise would do what? They would chew on their shirt collar or their t-shirt. They're going to chew on something because that's the need they have. Putting something like this on the top of a pencil. Now this is a one-time use, so that person gets that forever to take home and whatnot. And also ask the parents and the guardians, if a child has a sensory processing need, they probably already have their own fidget or something that they may have at home that they use and like. Allow them to bring that with them, you know? But again, build your own kit or collection of some things. Noise canceling headphones. Maybe it's allowing them to wear a baseball cap if that will help them cut the fluorescent light from, you know, again, as age appropriate, or again, some things will work better for an older person than a younger person, possibly. Again, as I said about the trampoline, just being able to jump and move. Movement is good for the brain. So sometimes you just need that brain break, okay? And think about people that have a sense of smell. This is just a scented tea bag, cinnamon, real scented, right? So just something that someone could carry. And in church, the other thing I would suggest is just a small votive candle that's scented, just for smelling, not for lighting. That would be something that they would be happy to just have and hold, and you know, it would help them attend, okay? So use what's already at our disposal. I always say use your resources wisely. But basically, some steps real quick. Identify the level of intensity of the emotion, okay? Is someone anxious, nervous? What's the actual emotion? The more you can peel that back, the more you're able to really serve that child, okay? And I'm going to say angry because sometimes someone is angry. And on this, I'm going to add one other thing for your backpack, is that when someone's angry, anger always stems from a hurt or a fear. So that helps you peel back that onion a little bit more. Maybe the person was bullied. Maybe that's why they're acting, and you're seeing anger or the symptom of anger, right? But if you can peel that back and understand, did something happen? Why are they angry? Again, it'll always stem from a hurt or a fear. So then determine what situation caused that emotion or that feeling was the next step. And then, of course, select the strategy that would be the most helpful in that particular situation, okay?
And we even had one person share in the chat that even it can be something as simple as a pen and paper to doodle on.
Doodle, you bet. I mean, look at those coloring books that have gotten so popular now, even for adults. It's meditative, you know, too. And that's not a bad thing for church either, to let, you know, people lean into that. Thank you. Thanks for the people putting things in the chat too. So then get to our next slide here. Okay. It was mentioned earlier, but we have to, of course, raise awareness to our new directory, right? We have a new catechetical directory that just came out. Very excited to see that come out in June this year. Chapter 8 in particular, they definitely speak to the disability community throughout the directory. We're grateful for that. But in particular, there's a portion of in a few pages and I think 4 paragraphs specifically written regarding persons with disabilities. So chapter 8 is where you'll want to look for that. From paragraph 272 in particular, I put the quote up from the new directory that really emphasizes a sacramental life. And most importantly, that they are emphatical. They've always said it, but in this document, in these words, especially there at the bottom where you see it, persons with disabilities are called to the fullness of sacramental life, even in the presence of severe disorders. The sacraments are gifts from God, and the liturgy, even before being rationally understood, needs to be lived. Therefore, this is the best of best. No one can refuse the sacraments to persons with disabilities. It's a non-negotiable, right? Non-negotiable. No one can refuse the sacraments to persons with disabilities. That's a baptismal rite, so you know as well. every baptized Catholic has 3 baptismal rites: to be educated in their faith, to be prepared and to celebrate their sacraments, and to respond to God's call. Okay? So typically what happens, right, is a couple has their child and they bring their child to the church to be baptized. Okay? And we welcome that baby and that family and that child. Well, if that child has a disability, number one, if you're in all involved in baptismal teams or preparation for baptisms, you don't want to lose sight of a family that comes who has a child with a disability of any age, but I just have a picture of an infant baptism here, because that's your inroad right there to journey with that family, of course, in this Pope Francis requests and tells us to do, to accompany them. So we don't want them to come baptize a child and go away and we lose track of who and what their needs are, because they're going to have many needs, and we as faith community need to support those needs, because they're going to hopefully come back, and we're going to encourage them to continue in their faith formation, both systematically and certainly sacramentally, so they can have that sacramental life, because that affirms what? The whole family's Catholic identity. And every time we do something and serve this community, youth and individuals with disabilities. So that's my old boss, Cardinal DiNardo in Houston, but he's confirming, and in this picture you see off to the very far left, a young man. It's actually her sister, it's her sponsor. So the young girl has autism. It's her sister, the oldest daughter of a family of 4 who doesn't have autism. Behind her, coming up next to be confirmed, they're twins actually being confirmed with autism that night. So the sister in the middle is the one that's in college. The other 2 now are being confirmed, and yet they have a younger brother who also has autism. So that was one family, as I told you, of many that exist today. But again, for her, and the other thing you can do, just a quick, I always say, look at how happy all the clergy are. The smiles on the clergy faces do my heart good in that picture. But it's just a matter of realizing that there's ways we can do things. Again, the prayer hands for saying amen, because I know that she did not say that. And the other thing to be very conscientious about, even though we're not talking specifically, but I have to give you these tips on confirmation, because they're lessons I learned over the years. Start practicing with baby oil, signing them on the forehead from day 1, so that you don't end up like I did one day, where a parent called me 2 weeks before confirmation with the cardinal and said, oh, by the way, her child doesn't even let the priest or anyone put ashes on their forehead on Ash Wednesday. Well, you can't be confirmed without that action. Of course, they have to be able to, bishop has to be able to sign them with the chrism oil. So now I always tell people, please start when you're doing preparation for that, or training others who do that preparation. And it doesn't hurt, again, like I said, what's needed for our kids is good for everybody. It doesn't hurt anyone else to have that same practice happen, but especially allow this to start earlier than later, that preparation, because that's a very unusual thing. And remember, sensory processing. They're not real used to strangers, number one, let alone someone like a bishop and all that goes with someone like that being at a big mass. So there's a lot of reasons you have to try and help prepare them a little longer than others. In this picture, of course, you should know Bishop Gomez, of course, Archbishop Gomez, who is now the current president of the USCCB. And that's Esther Garcia, one of my staff members with him. Esther is the member of our staff that I'm blessed to have who's bilingual. So I put her up there. I wanted you to know who she is. I'll give you her contact information at the end of this presentation as well, because if you need or want anything in Spanish and or to speak about things in Spanish yourself or others, she's the go-to person at NCPD. What has happened here in this picture is showing you when the revision of the guidelines for the celebration of the sacraments for persons with disabilities, that's a mouthful, when the revision came out in June of 2017, the bishops unanimously voted for some updates to that document that originally came out in 1995, updates that now include celiac disease, they include feeding tubes, dementia. So there was some updating to that people weren't talking about in the 90s that we are in 2020 or even in 2017. So when the bishop approved those updates, the English were made available right away. The Spanish were not, unfortunately, like sometimes the case. They came a little later. So when they came out, we were blessed to be able to get a grant from the OSV Institute that basically allowed we have boxes of Spanish guidelines. So in Spanish, if you'd like them for your parishes, you may contact us via our website. Esther will broker that for you, but you can ask for them. Other than just the postage, we ask to reimburse us for the postage to send them to you in Spanish, and they're a very nice hard copy, just like the English. Now, the English is only for sale via USCCB, but the for the hard document. But the Spanish, please let us know. Let Esther know if you'd like copies of those. Again, virtually free. So that was a gift. I'm going to put this up here. I know we're getting a little short on our time, so we have just a few more slides to get through. When I say cultural perspective and family life on this slide, I'm not talking about, and this family happens to be a Hispanic family, I'm not talking about just ethnicity. Having a loved one with a disability in a family, or several, as we've talked about today sometimes in families, that's a culture in and of itself that we need to be sensitive to. So I'm talking about that cultural perspective of families who love people with disabilities, okay, very intimately. They are their care providers day in and day out, right? So when you put that together with family life, you need to know a few things. One thing I would say right away is don't lose sight of the sibling. I say that to the parents and the grandparents as well as I say it to us as educators, because what happens, by virtue of the greater need, we do give a lot of attention and time, as we should, to those who need more from us. But at the same time, you don't want to lose sight of those other loved ones that are equally valued and needed, have needs of their own too, right? So just just an FYI, be sensitive to siblings and their needs, because that family dynamic might be different than yours or mine was if we didn't have a loved one with a disability in the family. It's very different. The other piece to know is, unfortunately, statistics as far as divorce go for families who have people with disabilities, children with disabilities, is excruciatingly high, actually. I think in the typical world these days, I know Catholics, by virtue of our faith, our statistic, which is still high, but it's lower than the average norm in the world. Let's say we're at about 45. Again, not great, but the average in the world might be around 60, 65 these days. For our families who have children with disabilities, the average, they say, goes up to like 80 to 90% statistic rate, that their chances of being divorced, of that marriage not making it because of the additional stress. Think about it, emotionally, financially, I would say obviously spiritually from a faith lens. So all those things are very much stressors on families. So again, I put that there to just say raise your awareness about that reality. Okay, the other topic, and I put this last question up here on our as a slide. What percentage of adults in the United States, because we just talked about some of the stress that those families live with, so be it anxiety, depression, etc., and maybe even more than that in some situations. What percentage of adults in the United States experienced mental illness in 2019? Now, this was a pretty current stat, and it went until, I would say, I think this stat when I read it, and I think this is coming off the National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI, was from up until about June of this year. So probably already getting into the pandemic, and as we can imagine, it's not going to go in the right direction. It's probably, unfortunately, we're going to have more and more people in need of care and experiencing mental illness via the grief that's going on for the loss people are having, jobs, loved ones, the trauma in general in the world, so many things that we're experiencing, unimaginable in some ways, especially all in one year. So that was our question next, is just what was your answer? Let me put the answer up and see how you did.
In our chat, we got 4 A's and a B and a C.
Okay.
So we had one right again.
Okay, there it is. C, 1 in 5 U.S. adults experience mental illness, right? Now, going back to just the 2019. 1 in 5 is a pretty big number too. And I say to clergy often, do you realize when you're looking at the people, well, even in the past in pews, or even now if they're at home, watching mass via live stream, 1 in 5 is a pretty big number to realize that either they or someone that they're there praying for those loved ones. So that's a big statistic. And again, it says 1 in 25 adults experience serious mental illness, right? So you've got mental illness, and you have some that might have it more exasperated. And lastly, on this note, and on the last slide, 1 in 6 U.S. youth age 6 to 17 experienced mental illness in 2019. 1 in 6 for the youth age 6 to 17 was the other statistic I didn't show you. This one, I really just kind of trying to highlight here on the left, 19%, there's a lot of little statistics over there about that breakdown of what the adults were dealing with, some various specific like obsessive compulsive disorder or schizophrenia, but 19%, the largest percentage, is anxiety disorder, right? We're just feeling stressed and anxious. We're in an area of such unknowing right now. Now there's opportunities that brings us to reflect on, just like in the question I gave you at the beginning. What can your parish look like? Use the time to imagine things now while we have some time, maybe to try and even battle that anxiety by using it for good planning purposes, you know, and imagining purposes. And on this one, it says 50% of all lifetime mental illness, look at the age, begins by age 14, right? And then 75% of all lifetime mental illness begins by age 24. Very young ages, folks, right? It says suicide is the second leading cause of death among people aged 10 to 34. Second cause of death. Amazing. NCPD is currently hosting a monthly series on suicide. As a matter of fact, our Council on Mental Illness. I've got a brochure that they created here coming up on the left, the pastoral response to mental illness. So our council, we have a council on intellectual and developmental disabilities, but we also have a council on mental illness. So right now it's the second Tuesday of, and you can see all this on our website, but it's the second Tuesday of every month. Father Ron Woolheiser will be with me coming up on October, whatever that second Tuesday, I think it's the 12th of October. So you know, you might want to pencil that date in if you have an interest in learning more, October 12th. I think 7 o'clock at night, 7 o'clock Central Time for, Eastern Time for me, which would be, I think, 6 Central for you. Also, these free prayer cards, another member of our Council on Mental Illness, Deacon Ed Schoner, his daughter, who this card on top, this current rendering of Saint Dimphna, was, he paid an artist to do this painting because he wanted it to look more like someone in our time than the 3rd or 4th century saint that she actually is, because most pictures of her do not look this modern, so to speak. But Deacon Ed Schoner's daughter died by suicide, and so in his grief he has started a lot of initiatives. Again, you can see more on our website, but the Saint Dimphna drawing rendering he paid for, and she of course is a patron saint of those with mental illness. And then there was a question about, well, that's fine for a woman because she was a woman, but what about for men? Is there a saint that you can lean into for men? And that's where the patron saint, the male version, is Saint John of God. And again, if you go to our website, you'll be able to hook up with that Katie Foundation. Katie was Deacon Ed's daughter's name, and that's his foundation where he provides these resources. A few other resources, again, just to kind of conclude with, our Ethics and Public Policy Committee wrote a statement earlier this summer, in spring actually, at the beginning of the pandemic, on the rights of persons with disabilities to medical treatment during COVID. Because as you know, and I'm sure you've heard on the news, or if you know and love someone with a disability, there can be great disparity in, well, there's lack of resources, so hence that sometimes pushes that moral issue of who gets what, and you know, and unfortunately sometimes that can be very much, you know, blessing versus burden as far as how people are choosing whose life, you know, gets the equipment that's needed. And of course our statement is saying that no, this cannot be a subjective choice. It has to be done objectively as well. Speaking of disability, pastoral guidelines on language, I spoke to you about that earlier, but this is just another document we've recently written regarding a lot more on that. And the LAM, we call it, is the Inclusive Participation Assessment Tool, which stands for Language, Accessibility, Meaningful Participation, and Belonging, which is a tool for a parish or a diocese or any property really to use to assess themselves as to how accessible they truly are. I mentioned our Council on Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities. They have always things they're undergoing as well for us. And currently they started, I think in April, putting online on our website adapted faith formation lessons. I'm sure some of you may have already seen or been maybe utilizing those. So we want you to know about that. Every month they choose a different theme and they create some activities, and it's usually families. I heard some of you I know do some family-based intergenerational activities. So these are really written for families to do together, especially now in this COVID environment. But certainly they can be used on-site or virtual. My book that I'm very proud to say was published by Loyola Press just August 2019. It came out. I will tell you, in 1 year, amazingly, I say it's a little book that could. We wanted to write a book, my colleague and ministerial buddy back in Houston, John Baroni, and I, years ago, that was what we were always out talking about and trying to teach. We knew if we wrote it down in a book, it would get to more people. So we wrote The Adaptive Teacher, Faith-Based Strategies to Reach and Teach Learners with Disabilities. This little book, a lot of what I've talked about today and much more is in the book. And I'm just proud to tell you that within 1 year, before August 2020, it had won 6 awards. So it just keeps winning awards. And I'm like, I just keep saying that was time well spent writing that book. That's all I can say. And especially because it tells me hopefully that people are reading it and implementing it. And I think if you've seen it yet at all, it is written in a very easy read and it's extremely practical, which was our goal. And with that said, I'm going to just close with a very brief prayer, in the sense of just saying to you that our prayer, NCPD's prayer, my prayer, is that you will commit to make changes so that persons with disabilities and their families can meaningfully participate in your faith community. And with that, I just thank you very much for your presence today and pray you have a very blessed year. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlene, for sharing your information and your statistics and your resources. We really appreciate your time and your efforts. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
Take mine down, sure.
Can everybody see the diocese webpage?
Is mine gone? Did mine go away, hopefully? Okay, thank you.
There, now you should see the diocese webpage.
Yes.
And what I'm going to do is, Charlene mentioned a couple of resources available, and I am going to show you where you can find those resources on your own diocese webpage. During the time of pandemic, this is what I was working on, is finding all the good resources out there from NCPD and other Catholic resources. So you can see on our webpage, under Ministries and Faith Formation, we have 2 pages listed here. We have the Deaf Ministry page and Disability Ministry. Everything that we put on the Deaf Ministry page, we also included it in the different subpages in Disability Ministry. So I just want to let you know, you don't have to go 2 different places to get those resources. And if you look under Disability Ministry, here's the little logo that we've come up with. And over on the left side, we have some different subpages. The first subpage I want to share with you is Parish Disability Resources. It's moving, there it switched. Oh. And if you scroll down to the Awareness and Welcoming section, there is where that LAM, that Inclusive Participation Assessment Tool, is located. That will take you right to it. We also have those, speaking of disability, pastoral guidelines in English or Spanish. And then the other thing I wanted to point out is we also have cue cards for disabilities and cue cards for mental illness. Obviously, during the time of the pandemic, you can't use cue cards, but maybe there's some wording on those cards that you can utilize for awareness. And then if you even scroll a little bit farther down to the bottom, we have some mental health resources. She talked about those free prayer cards. So you have a link to get to those also. There's just a couple other pages I wanted to show. Under this area, we have Catechist Leader Resources. And Charlene talked about fidget tools. So if you scroll down, we have a sensory fidget tool section that talks about a sensory fidget tool resource. So some different information talking about those. And then the last page I wanted to show you is on the prayer resources for people with disabilities. So if you needed some prayers or some prayer intentions, there's lots of different prayers in here, specifically the prayers of the faithful for Autism Awareness Month. Those might be useful for some prayer intentions, and they can easily be adapted to a different specific disability or a general disability itself. Feel free to check out all the other resources on your own time. Many of them do link to NCPD resources and other Catholic resources. And if there's something you're looking for and you can't find it, please just ask me. And I just want to remind you that October is Respect Life Month, and we hear a lot about the dignity of before birth and at the end of life. But I challenge you to be aware of the middle of life and those people with disabilities that we need to accompany in our parishes. John mentioned that October is National Disability Employment Month. So that is one of the things that is near and dear to my heart. My son is employed, and that's the highlight of his life, is having a job, having a way to share his gifts with others. It's also Down Syndrome and Learning Disabilities Awareness Month. And then October 4th through the 10th is Mental Health Awareness Week. So I really encourage you to start discussions at your parish of how to be more inclusive and to ask and listen to families with members with disabilities. You can do an activity or do a prayer petition just to raise awareness about persons with disabilities. And really do think about who in your parish could be that advocate for persons with disabilities and help lead and ask and listen to families. In a presentation I watched in one of my first conferences that I watched a recording of was in a presentation by Dr. Eric Carter from Barriers to Belonging, and it was called The Church and People with Disabilities, and they shared a survey of 500 families reported that the most helpful thing and at the top of their list was having disability awareness efforts in their faith communities. So just doing a small awareness thing, many of the ideas that Charlene shared will mean a lot to families and feel that they're being listened to. Also, I just want to let you know that I've started this summer scheduling some meet and greet with parish priests and some faith formation directors, and I will probably be reaching out to many of you in this next year and setting those up. So I look forward to meeting you then. And at this time, I'm going to check the chat. I'm going to stop my sharing and see if there's any questions, or if anybody wants to voice a question now, they certainly can. Otherwise, we're going to turn it over to Loyola Press. All right, I don't see any questions, but if you think of any in the next few minutes, we can grab them after we are finished with the next part of our presentation. So this next part of the presentation, we are blessed to have Loyola Press, who has sponsored Charlene today. And we have Maureen Parish and Melissa Malgoza from Loyola Press, and they're going to give us some information on their new Wanderlight product. So go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name's Maureen Barisi, and my colleague Melissa Malgoza is here on the call with us. And we're both here because we just had some brand new information this week that some of our territories are being switched around. So I've been with Loyola Press for about 3 months. Melissa is much more my experienced senior here, so you are getting a wonderful rep. So she's here with us today so that if you have any questions, you can feel free to still reach out to me, or Melissa will be taking over come October.
Yes, good morning, everybody.
So thank you, Charlene. I really enjoyed listening to the presentation. Patty, thank you for allowing this to happen and inviting us in. Loyola Press in general, we're really focusing on Wanderlight today because it's our newest product. And it really comes in fitting with the time of pandemic for any type of learners. Almost all ages can enjoy this game. We do have adaptive learning kits through Loyola Press. We have other resources. Obviously, we have Charlene's book, which I understand maybe there'd be a surprise at the end, John, or Sherry's going to be talking about that. But so please feel free to visit our website on any of those or ask us if there's any other, you know, tools that may help you with your students who may have various disabilities. So right now it's just a focus on Wanderlight because I just have about 15 minutes. So I want to thank you for your attention, and let's make sure I can share my screen.
If you go down to the bottom and hover, hopefully share screen comes up.
There we go. Okay, and I'm going to go on screen 2, hopefully. Thank you for bearing with me. We all have our our skills and our hiccups when it comes to various forms of technology, right? Is it coming up? No?
We're not seeing it yet. Are you, let's see here, you're hitting that green button at the bottom and it's saying share screen. Let me see if I can pull it. Let's see.
Are you seeing any of my screens yet? Are you all seeing any of my screens yet?
Now we are.
Okay, so oh my goodness, hold on a second. I don't know why.
Melissa's sharing.
Melissa, you, I've had it up the whole presentation. I don't know what just happened. Okay. You can all see Melissa's screen, but hear me?
Now we can't see the Wanderlight screen.
Yeah, it was on, but now it's off.
Okay, wait a second.
I took it down because I thought you wanted to try one more time, but if you want me just to put it back up and we'll go from there, we can do that, Maureen.
I'm going to try. I'm so sorry. I
That's
had it
okay.
up the whole time.
Is it on your computer? Can you see it? Okay, so then
Yeah.
you're just hitting that green button at the bottom. It says share screen, obvious. I'm probably telling you what you already know, but share screen, and then you're just highlighting the actual slideshow. It'll just take over your
Yes.
picture.
I don't know why the slideshow is not working.
Oh, okay. So up at the top, you just say enable slideshow and then go to the far left.
From beginning.
From the beginning.
Yeah, I don't know why it's not working. It worked when oh my goodness. Okay.
Okay, well, here we go. I just hope I can, keep up with you or just know when to navigate the slides.
So can you show your screen, Melissa? I am so sorry. I don't know why this isn't working. I've had it.
Yes, I'm here. I'm got it up.
Okay.
But let me see.
Okay. Okay. This was off to a rusty start. So I'm sorry, everyone. Okay. So where?
We just lost the screen again. Sorry, Melissa.
No, that's okay. I'm enabling the audio because we have a short video to play. So I want to make sure we don't run into a problem. Okay, we should be ready.
Okay, Melissa, that's your screen sharing?
Yes.
Okay.
I apologize. Just tell me to
Thank
forward the slide whenever you're ready. And I'm sorry, I apologize. It's probably not the smoothest, but
it's
we'll
short.
Get it. Yeah, it's the content that matters.
It exactly is the content that matters. So sorry for the technical hiccups. Okay, so Wanderlight. Wanderlight is our newest. It's a brand new Catholic video game. It's groundbreaking for Catholic kids of all ages, as well as those interested in learning about the Catholic faith. The game invites players to explore the 4 pillars of the Catholic faith in an engaging and beautiful virtual world and venture out in their role as a pilgrim. So the The pilgrim, this game is a pilgrim equipped with the Holy Spirit and guided by the Holy Spirit and equipped with a light, and goes on a journey of quests, making good personal choices, navigating through meeting saints, learning prayers. It's really a beautiful game. So what I'm just going to quickly cover, Melissa, if you'll move to the next slide, is just the game features. Basically, there's a beautiful video we're going to watch. It's just about 2 minutes long, and it really speaks for itself. We have a short, I'll do a screenshot. We have administrating and reporting features for those of you that may want to keep track of your students' progress. And this is just not for persons with disability. We are obviously, sharing this game with everyone, and it's working out to be a good source for those who have greater needs. Okay, so then the next slide is the video. So I am going, Melissa will click on that, and hopefully we can all hear the video.
Kids have many ways to learn about the Catholic faith, but how can they learn while exploring how to put that faith into action? Introducing Wonderlight, a groundbreaking new Catholic video game from Loyola Press. In Wonderlight, kids role-play discipleship in an epic adventure with a customized character that lets children imagine themselves in the world of the game. As the pilgrim, players are guided by their dove, who represents the Holy Spirit. Through their pilgrimage, kids explore a diverse world of charming characters who share key Catholic concepts. Children are encouraged to find and meet every saint in the game, and they can learn more about the saints and holy people by viewing their symbols in a fun, interactive collection. When kids need to take a break from their adventure, they can enter the prayer tent, a calming space where they can practice traditional prayers in a meditative read-along experience. Each region of the world has its own church where kids will meet friendly and helpful clergy and lay people. Each church features an interactive version of the Stations of the Cross that kids can explore at their own pace. Visiting churches also allows kids to witness key examples of Catholic rituals, such as Mass and the sacraments. Through these experiences, kids follow the stories of the game's characters as they grow and develop in faith. Throughout their journey, kids will engage with the cast of characters in conversations that encourage their social, emotional, and decision-making skills.
I know I'm not from here, but I'm really hurt, and I can't get home without help. Will you help me? Oh, thank you. I saw a church on my way here. Can you go there and get help?
The Pilgrim's Lantern brightens and dims based on your child's choices. Wonderlight also features a variety of mini-games that provide interactions to enhance the story and engagement with Catholic teaching. Wonderlight gives kids a new way to engage with and talk about their faith, putting their lessons of discipleship into practice in a safe and fun way. Wonderlight is a shining new addition to Loyola Press's line of Catholic products. Learn more at wonderlightgame.com.
Thank you, Melissa.
Yes.
So
No
as you
problem.
can see, you can access Wonderlight. You can access from the Loyola Press website. There's a Wonderlight tab to click on, or you can go directly to the wonderlightgame.com website. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but we just want you to know for parishes and schools that purchase this, and by the way, the game can be purchased individually on an app as well. But for parishes and schools, we do have special bulk pricing. So if anyone's interested, please reach out to Melissa or I, and we can let you know what that looks like. But the administrative reporting is kind of a nice feature. It gives a parent or a teacher or a catechist a bird's eye view into the gameplay. For example, they can see which players have been favorited and return to those who enjoy repetition. Those students that want to go back to those same favorite characters, you can see which prayers they've learned, when they've spent time in the prayer tent. So it's really a nice piece, and it can hold accountability for parishes that are looking for something like this. Other ways for students to practice their faith, since we can't all be together in a fun way and we are in this virtual world. This is a nice way for students to be able to make personal choices and practice their faith and learn about it in a fun way, fun modern way. The next slide, Melissa, if you would. Okay, so why Wonderlight? I think Wanderlight's been in the works for much longer than I've been with Loyola Press, and it's perfect that it's out now, as I already mentioned. Wanderlight is fun and engaging, and it has a variety of structure. There's 3 zones, there's different quests within the levels, there's a variety of mini gameplay, and there's definitely a much variety, but there's also, it's within a reliable structure and sequence of actions. So there is a repetitive nature for those that, like to go back to that. The game is unapologetically Catholic. It's a beautiful, I hope you saw from the video, it's really beautifully laid out. Wanderlight isn't overstimulating. It has, I just jumped, I'm sorry. It meets kids where they are. There's different levels for different grade levels. And then it has, it helps with enrichment. It helps review and reinforce learning. And especially for our students with greater needs, it's not overstimulating. The graphics I hope you saw from the video are very pleasing, gentle voices and calming music. And the dialogue, as you see here, it's always spoken and in text on the screen. So, captioned, if you will. So it works really well for those who have hearing impairments or those who are non-readers alike. They can hear exactly where their quest is going. So, and Charlene, feel free to pop in if there's anything you want to add to what I'm spelling out here with Wanderlight. And finally, it doesn't require the quick twitch motor skills, fine motor skills. The action's a little bit slower, and the accomplishment is a little bit easier than a lot of video games that may be overstimulating and very, fast. There's different ways you can use the mouse. You can click. Some students like to click, but you can also just guide your mouse through the path. So it's very versatile for all types of learners and all types of different fine and gross motor skills. What else did I want to say about that? Did you want to add anything, Charlene, or did I?
No, I liked your list. It seemed very comprehensive of some of the positive feedback we've been hearing about Wanderlight regarding some who have, different processing styles and speeds, and the captioning, very helpful. Voice, so if you need it read to you, I mean, it really does serve it wasn't built for this community, but it serves them well.
Yes. And again, this can be purchased through a parish at bulk pricing, or if you are using Christ Our Life or Finding God for your faith formation, it can be as little as $1.99 with the purchase of a student book. And then there are quantity breakdowns. And then as through the parish or a school, you have the back-end administration, but there are options if families want to purchase this game on their own. That does not go through Loyola Press. That is on our website for individuals, and you would just purchase that through the Apple App Store or the Google App Store. So there is an option if you parish leaders do not want to, track or have the back end, but you can still offer it to your families. And then if you just pop up the last slide, Melissa. So if you would like more information on Wanderlight or anything else at Loyola Press, I do recognize many of your names. Some of you I've talked to just as recently as this week, placing your orders. But if there's anything else you need in any of our areas from Loyola Press, or especially for those who have greater needs, please reach out to us and we will share all the resources that we have. So you can email us. I put mine and Melissa's contact information up here so you can put faces with the name. And I was just rushing through quick because we were ending, and I know Melissa and I have an 11 o'clock training we need to hop on Wanderlight, actually on the back end administrative portal. So is there any questions at this time?
There looks like there is one question in the chat. It looks like it's available for iPad users. Is there a plan to offer it on Apple Store for iPhones?
It is not available. It doesn't work on an iPhone at this point. It is a very robust, detailed game. So it doesn't, the bandwidth is not set up for the iPhones yet. You do need a laptop, a tablet, or a desktop. So I don't know if that question comes up a lot. Will it be available on a phone? And I don't know. I mean, I hope yes, but not yet. All Is
I don't
any
see
other
any
questions?
questions.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Well,
Thank you all for your presentation, and we'll turn it back over to John.
all right. Thank you all for your
Thank
time.
you.
We're going to hop off and
Yes, thank you,
Have-
and have a good rest of the week, and I look forward to working with you all in the future.
bye. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. Thank you, Melissa.
Thanks. Take care.
Patty, I'm going to turn it over to you since I am coming in and out, and have you and Sherry do some door prizes.
All right, Sherry, do you want to unmute yourself? We are giving away 4 copies of the Adaptive Teacher book that Charlene was one of the authors on. So Sherry's put your names in a hat for those attending, and she's going to let us know who she's drawn.
All righty. We have 4 books. My paper are little. Okay, I have, oh, Alyssa Beasley,
All right, yay.
Barb Hudson, Jenny, and David Rising.
Congratulations.
Very good. And those, when those come in, we will get those mailed out to you so that you have them. They really are excellent. So
And
thank you,
I'm
Charlie.
I'm not ashamed to ask for Amazon reviews either.
Oh, there you go. There you go. We'll have
Those of you
to
who
get
don't
one in the hopper.
Helpful. Thank you.
While we still have Charlene, I'm going to invite people to have questions about what she's discussed. If there's a, one thing that was kind of an aha moment for you, maybe 1 or 2 areas where you're like, I wish I had a little bit more information on that. So you can maybe approach it from that particular perspective. One person who couldn't be here today but is looking forward to the answer in the recording has to do with adult faith formation and RCIA. And so for those who are working in that specific ministry of lifelong formation and faith, is there specific strategies that are helpful for adults besides really trying to encounter person to person the individual and start a conversation and a relationship?
Cutting out a little bit, John. You're frozen right now.
Did you want me to respond to that a little bit, John? I wasn't sure if you were just posing it or you wanted me to.
No, that was a question for you, Charlene, is adult ministry and RCIA ministry strategies that are helpful.
Okay, this is what I have seen and personally incorporated, so if this helps. One thing is, don't discount the benefits of buddies at any ages. So even still when you're working with adults, young adults or adults, whether there's someone in the group that might be that buddy, maybe it is a family or a member or someone else that might be with them that joins to help kind of accompany them a little more closely. That might be a need that, and a strategy that would meet the need. So that's one piece, is always to not lose sight of that benefit of, again, accompaniment, but actually someone intentionally as a support person for someone. The other one to remember is, especially on someone on the spectrum, I had this one night myself. I went in to teach an adult faith formation class, and I was the presenter. And so the adults that were at the parish that were the coordinators of the presentation, it was very interesting to me. Now, I was there to talk on a totally different topic that night. So they really didn't know what my kind of bailiwick was. So it was interesting. They came up to me and they were kind of like trying to be discreet. And while we were setting up the LCD projector or something, they were like, there's a person in the class and he's got autism and he's in the green t-shirt over there. And they were trying to like whisper and tell me about someone in this class, this young adult who had autism. Well, I was smiling inside because first I was like, great, there's someone with a disability in an adult faith formation class. So that was is positive. What I found in this case, and it may help with other situations, especially sometimes for someone on the spectrum. And I will say, sometimes I hold up the Big Bang Theory and Sheldon on the Big Bang Theory. If any of you have ever watched that show, it was a little popular a few years back, more so. But he even though he wasn't supposed to be, imitating someone with autism, he had some of the characteristics. So people kind of put the two together. But in a sense, with him and like this person that was in my class that night, he was very intellectually very smart. Okay, he knew his Catholicism, I can tell you. But if I hadn't set boundaries with him, he could have talked all night. So what I would just say is sometimes with adults more so, they may have to be really reminded of or given, and a leader even who knows them, like that parish, the coordinator, people who know him more, that saw him every day than me too, could also assist by saying one-on-one, of course, not in any way to embarrass or anything him, but one-on-one to talk to them about the fact that in a group of 15 or 20 people or more, maybe you have a room of 100 back in the day when we were live, or even virtually, that you can only ask 3 questions tonight. So in this 45 minutes, that's your limit. You have to give them a boundary because they have good questions. They also have good answers, but just set boundaries for them. That would be 2 of my best tips: a buddy system or someone to accompany, and make sure that you, because they're not a mind reader. None of us are. So you just have to tell them what your expectations are. And then they'll follow them because they're very much the kind of rule-oriented people. And if you tell them what the rule or the process is, they will stay strictly in those boundaries typically, but they need to be known.
I have to just tell you a story. Limiting the questions is what we do for our son also, because he could ask question after question. So we would give him like 3 little chips or tokens or popsicle sticks, and he would hand them to his buddy so then he could see when he was done. Okay, I'm done. That's all the questions I can ask tonight.
And again, age appropriately, that's beautiful. And it's the visual ideal.
For those that need that visual cue, so.
Yeah. Good. And if you don't have a question right now, I go back to my question. And if you do, please ask. But otherwise, I go back to my question through the presentation. And now that you've had, I know you won't, if you're like me, you'll still be percolating on things you heard next week in your car and later, but as well. But any thought come to mind about something you could do different to make your parish, your faith community more inclusive? Did any light bulb go off, or any idea like maybe I'll try this? What's your this?
I don't know if it was a light bulb for me because my previous background as a special ed teacher, but I think probably the light bulb is teaching other people, or teaching the parish staff, or teaching just community people in general the person first language. I think that's a big part of how you present something to somebody, is a big part of being inclusive. Like just knowing you belong is the first step for a lot of this.
Beautiful. Thank you, Jenny. I wrote another book. It's actually a booklet, and you can find it on Amazon. Very inexpensive, I think $2 or $3. But it's called Talking to Children About People with Disabilities, or How to Talk to Children About People with Disabilities. And the reason that one came about, of course, was just because I have always said, and I said it to my staff when I got to NCPD, it's great, we're always trying to serve those with disabilities. But what are we doing to educate everybody else about people with disabilities? Because truth is, they're the greater population. And if we don't make some movement in that area, right, we're not making the movement we need. Even like Patty said, never heard of NCPD before. I hear that all too often. I had a sister who had 2 children with both had born with birth defects and disabilities. Now her children are now 50 years old. Cradle Catholic, always and still very connected to her church. But she really, until I got on the board at NCPD and started getting much more immersed years ago with NCPD, she never heard of it. And I'm like, that's terrible. And this was a parent and family who could have used the support all alone. And that, yeah, so that's something you can do. Make sure your parishes know about NCPD, because if the parish knows, then it starts getting into the people in the pews who really need to know about us. Okay. And, you know, I know when I worked in the diocese, I'm no different from here. Anybody can reach us. We're not, you know, typically hierarchically, I'm serving, you know, you're my audience, the diocese and stuff, but parishes and families individually as well. Again, all are welcome to tap on this door if they have a need for it we can help with. And usually if someone comes to us, the first thing we do, of course, we'll tell them to check their diocese and or their parish leadership naturally. And usually we know who's got somebody on, you know, first base or second base. But in light of COVID, my own job was taken away. Well, when I left, they had it up for an opening and then they had to take it down in March. So, you know, a lot of that was happening. We've had other people in this ministry, their jobs, like many others, have to be furloughed or let go right now. So again, we become more relevant, so to speak, because there's less of us thinking and praying and working in this ministry 24/7. So we're here to serve whatever you need. Show of hands, how many of you already know and love somebody with a disability? Of those I can see. Right. And that's changed too. You have to realize 20 years ago, when I would ask that question, 1 or 2 hands would go up. Just like now. Today, most hands, and I say visible because I can't see everybody, but as you saw, most every hand went up. I think maybe every one hand went up. That's much more common now. It talks to that rise in the statistic. Prayers of the faithful, folks, even those in your masses and your liturgies, it's a simple thing you can do, and that raises awareness. So don't lose sight of how simple, small things make a difference. They make a difference to that family. You've heard the story of the guy throwing the starfish back in the water, right? It made a difference to that one. So every which way you can do things. Just be that advocate.
Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me, Charlene.
Yes.
How might we find your resource on how to talk to children about others with disabilities?
Yeah, I know it's on Amazon. I have them here as well in my office. I mean, if you want, I think it's on our website, and we could certainly mail one and send it to you from here. And again, I think they're on Amazon. They're $2.95. I would just say $3, but so you can always either email me later and I can mail it out to you or something. Whichever is easier.
And I have a copy in the diocese office too. So if you want to take a look at that, let me know and I could mail you that out to check it out at least.
I will tell you, one of my brothers who's a catechist in a parish in Columbus, Ohio, a Dublin suburb of Columbus, told me when that book came out in January of 2019. I just remember, and that's kind of nice because it was, you know, he's my brother, but he's also a catechist in a parish, very well versed, and he's been catechist for years. But he said to me, he said, I went to my DRE or PCL, whatever he calls in that area of the country, sometimes it's different, his catechetical leader, and said, give me 20 minutes in every class and I'll go around and do some of these activities. Because there's activities in there that are very simple that just really help raise awareness, again, to the rest of the community. It raises their kindness level, raises their empathy level. You know, that's what we're working on with everybody else oftentimes.
Well, okay, my confession is I had to miss your presentation, Charlene, but I look forward to watching it on video and I can take notes slowly. But so maybe you've already addressed this, but my question has to do with not just physical or mental disabilities, but emotional disabilities, and how we might better serve children or adults with those needs as well.
I say you watch for signs and symptoms, number one, because we talked earlier about, you know, all behavior is communication. So there's usually signs and symptoms that kind of tip you off that someone might be struggling or their anxiety level is rising even more. There's a term called stimming. Some of us are familiar with it, but stimming is, you know, we talked about using fidgets, but, you know, it's the person that, like in my chair right now, I would just be constantly wiggling. It looks like I'm just being a big distracting being maybe, but really if I saw that in someone, part of me says they need that. They need the movement. Again, it might be, you know, I showed something earlier about just a small 3-foot, you can buy those portable trampolines. It could be in a room in a corner where someone, you might just invite them to go take a few jumps on a trampoline. Or, you know, maybe there's an opportunity to just go outside, someone can take a walk and come back or down a hall. There's signs that tell you they're having some sensory need. And that movement in that chair, or just allow the movement in the chair. This is behind me. I don't think I showed it earlier. This is called a wiggle seat. Okay, it's just a padded pillow. You put it under someone's bottom or on their chair or wherever they're seated, bench. I had one pastor tell me he was going to put them in all the pews. I told him, Father, I think they'd like it. But it just allows someone to be seated, and it helps them stay seated because it allows them to have the movement of like me turning in my chair like this. I always say wiggle while you work. It's kind of along that idea. Someone could wiggle while they work. So anything that allows people to, again, movement is good for the brain. We were talking about that. If I had another lifetime, I'd go and spend my life studying the brain because it's fascinating to me. But it's helpful for educators and parents and the like to learn more about that too. Another big piece of this, you talk, and stimming, I'll go back to stimming. So when you see someone maybe just flapping their hands, that's another, it looks like a, you know, not a socially appropriate behavior. And that's why they get teased or they get attention. And oftentimes people question basically what they don't know or understand. So again, then it goes back to educating. When people have knowledge and they see someone doing something like this in mass, they're going to understand, oh, that person's just stimming. So then if you realize that that's just a self-regulation behavior for them, you're much more compassionate, you know, as opposed to, and the adage is always be curious, not judgmental. So if you see, and you teach this to other people, these are little adages that you can just teach other people. They're like planting seeds, okay? So be curious, not judgmental. And even more so in my other little booklet for the, you know, how to talk to children, you have to raise children, and how we, you know, they're little sponges, especially when you think of young children. And I say between birth and 5, when your brain is, the biggest burst of brain development, right, is between 1 and 5, or birth and 5. What the child sees and experiences during those years in particular is invaluable to their social emotional health when they grow up. You know, we always focus on, you know, ABCs and 1, 2, 3s. Everything you read right now about social emotional health, and especially executive function, which is a whole other chapter in the book, in the larger book, is talks about knowing how to self-regulate and manage emotions. Now remember, calm begets calm. And even on how we respond to someone with a disability, if the parent sheers the child away when they see someone with a disability out in the world, the child gets the message that there's something wrong with having a disability, and they associate stigma or shame with it, as opposed to a parent allowing the child to ask the question. I have a friend, he's blind. When he walks down the street, we've talked about this, he said, yeah, you know, he's blind, but he hears. So he hears the child ask the parent, what's wrong with that man? Or, you know, because he doesn't understand the white cane. But he'll often try and talk to the child if he has the opportunity, because children, they don't have those filters. And so they will ask their questions. And he would rather, and of course, sometimes the parent might allow it. And maybe more parents now are a little more open because we talk about this more, right? So that's why we have to have these dialogues, not only in the church, but in our family dinner tables and everywhere else. We all have a circle of influence, right? So wherever you can have these conversations, even about tonight, about what was the presentation you heard today, when you're talking with your family later, chat about these things, because inevitably you're passing on something you've learned to someone else. So again, on things like behavioral, sometimes you can see where someone's kind of starting to spin out of control, and you can proactively give them you know, a resource to use, or allow them to have a break they need. That's my thoughts.
So hopefully you can hear me. I think we're going to take a quick 10-minute break. Then we're going to talk about return to learn and kick off with Jenny and Paulette for an update on virtual family faith formation and the incredible work they're doing. There was a chat, so I don't know if Charlene, people might be going to break to kind of do a little stretch. but I wondered if you could, there was a question that a youth minister who couldn't be with us posed. This youth minister, questions about unstructured time that's in youth ministry. Are there strategies to help those who there may be some, they want to participate, but it could be also very frustrating?
Right. I think in youth ministry, that's a huge challenge for them. And I like sometimes talking to youth ministers because they need to realize what's going on in some of the youth in front of them's bodies. So they, when you say to a bunch of youth, line up because we're going to do this, forced choice thing and all these things, that is not what works for every youth. As a matter of fact, it's almost traumatizing for some. So you're going to have people who either don't want to go to that faith formation anymore, they're going to resist. There's got to be some other options. I always say the more options you give people, the more people you serve. So you may have some activities that are very engaging or very, loosely structured, but then I would say intentionally, proactively plan for at least a small group of people. Again, remember the buddy system or some accompaniment, and especially because you should know who is in your group. It's like a presenter, know your audience, right? So if you know your audience and you have someone who has some different needs, and you hopefully even know what those specific needs are, because every person's different, then you might be able to plan accordingly to have some other options for them to be involved in during the unstructured time that is more structured. I mean, simply put. I also appreciate that Jenny's with us, and I'm even going to invite Jenny because, again, use your resources wisely. Jenny, could you add some things to that? Because I saw you shaking your head.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Oh, that's good.
So a few things we've done and a few things that come to my mind, and I was typing some in the chat, but definitely buddy them up with somebody else. We've done that. We did that last year. We found an older, anyways, we buddied them up together. So they had somebody to feed off of or somebody to talk back and forth with. And then I would provide structured activities for those times. So obviously planning ahead is helpful. So you know what the activities are going to be within that youth group. And then if you need to chunk out those activities, so we're going to do 1, 2, and 3, and when we're done, we'll go take a break. Or like you said, if it usually takes them twice as long to do half the work. So we're only going to do this part of the activity, and then we'll take a break. Or maybe it's a game they were playing and that individual can't play the full part of the game, but they can be the timekeeper, something to include them some way and use their gifts, whatever those gifts may be, that even if they aren't fully participating in the game, if they're the timekeeper, they're still participating in the activity and they're still with their peers. So, and the biggest thing I found with, as far as youth ministry, is the parents just want the kids involved with their peers. So however you can make that happen, whatever that looks like, as long as those kids and those peers are all together, that's the biggest thing.
Totally true. Yep.
And from a parent
community, yeah.
From a parent perspective, I just want to make sure that when you're doing the buddy system, switch up the buddies so it's not the same person you're calling on all the time, because they need to have their own time. Yeah. And then also be cognizant of the siblings of the person with disability. Many times my kids are like, oh, they're always matching me up. I have to deal with my son at home. I mean, they didn't mind, but sometimes, I would just make a point of like, hey, that's okay to use them, but just be cognizant of the siblings' needs also.
And the parents. Don't rely on the parent being the mentor or the buddy while they're here. And in rare cases, it has to happen because things fall apart and it has to happen. But most of us are in parishes that have lots and lots of people in them. Find somebody else to be a buddy to that individual.
I agree with that. Parents should be, sometimes I always say we might need them initially for transition reasons because it takes time to build some relationships.
Yep.
But we want to get them out of that equation as soon as possible. They need respite more than most, as we know. And we talked about that a little bit earlier. Absolutely. And the other thing is, remember that baptismal rite about responding to God's call? I always say, don't lose sight of thinking it has to be the same people in front of you that have to be those buddies and do some of these assist positions. Every parish has a wealth of resources, untapped, at their disposal, and especially for this ministry, because you have youth, and especially I would say young adults, young professionals, adults in your parish working in all kinds of variety of healthcare forms and fashions, already special ed teachers, PTs, OTs, pediatricians, nurses. There's a lot of people in the healthcare field as young adults and adults that are, they're maybe not called to be a lector or an usher or a Eucharistic minister, but if they heard that you needed someone to support a disability ministry, to be a buddy, or even to maybe adapt a lesson plan accordingly for a certain individual, some, few hours a month or something along those lines, they would hear that. They would hear God calling them to that, to serve in that, because they could do it. It's like when I started in this ministry, it's because one family brought Brandon to be educated in his faith. Brandon had Down syndrome. I was not a catechist at that time, but the leader at my parish knew I had a special ed background, which I was not using in my day job at that time, and came and asked me if I would teach Brandon this faith. Now, I've always joked it was kind of like peanut butter and chocolate going together. I was a cradle Catholic with a special ed degree. And I swear to you, it was a God thing, because I don't think I would have ever had the wherewithal to put those two together, but that's what I just said. Sure, easy for me to do. Again, with my background, most catechists we know are not trained educators formally, let alone in special ed. So they do need all these tips and tools, which thank God there's more of them out there now than before. And again, I say there's people though that are willing to come forward if they hear the call, but our responsibility as leadership is to put that call out to the community and let them know what your needs are. And believe me, they come forward. I mean, even to give presentations to a group of catechists, even virtually right now, they're absolutely willing to assist. It's their passion too, it's their advocacy, that they're happy to help if you ask them. Don't lose sight of those resources.
Charlene, I just really appreciate your comment, and Jenny too, about having, and Patty, actually, having the buddies be changed up so that it's not always the same person or always drawing from the child with disabilities, drawing from their family. And I think why I like that so much is it gives others a chance to learn to love. And otherwise we rob them of that opportunity. Yeah. So, and that applies, you take that learning and you can apply it to just about any situation in your life, in your work environment. If you are a teacher during the day, all of that, letting others learn how to love is just, I think, kind of what our job is. Yeah.
And I always say, we need them more than they need us. Truth be told, we need them more. And I just realized, can you see on my other shoulder over there? While we're sitting here in silence, while people are pondering for a minute. But that one is timetimer.com is the website, timetimer.com. But visual timers are very good tools also, because it lets someone actually who really doesn't have a concept of time, which is a lot of young people, but even also some others with disabilities, may not have a good concept of time. So this one, obviously, it just kind of ticks away the red so they can see how much, visually, again, going back to using visuals is another nice tip to consider.
I think John had mentioned that his internet was giving him some issues, but I believe we're all slated now for a quick break before coming back to discuss some return to learn pieces for next steps for the fall and the good stuff going on over at Saints John and Paul as well. So I think we'll go ahead and move to that. It's 11:18 on my laptop. I think that's about accurate. Yep. So call it about 11:25 or so to rejoin. All right.
Thanks for the invitation, everyone. Have a good day and a great year. God bless.
Hi, Patty.
Hi, Mary.
I started writing you, but I'm like, I'm just going to say to her, I apologize. I'm getting up so much today. I just have to tell you, my kiddo is here because it's virtual.
Right. I believe Jenny and Paulette, did you have kind of some updates or stuff to share about how things are going at St. John and Paul with the virtual full family formation?
I had to find my mute button. Well, so we had after all those months of preparation, we had our first sessions last week. So Sunday the 13th, and then last Wednesday. We had about, our numbers are down, I think, like a lot of people's, but we had about 50 people join, or 50 households, I should say, join live on Sunday and about 40 on Wednesday. And of course, that doesn't account for the people who watch the recordings. We hope that they do. And we were pretty pleased, I think, Jenny, with how things went. In considering that we were still last week figuring out some of the kind of the technical pieces of things. We were able to borrow a webcam from the diocese at the last minute, but didn't have time to figure out exactly how to use it. So we did it all on Zoom with recordings and people in different rooms, but for the most part, it went well. I would say one of the things that we learned a little bit by accident is the importance of doing a run through. So on Friday afternoon, we said, we've just got to run through this. There's so many moving parts. We've got these pre-recorded videos, and then we're cutting to people, who are presenting live in different rooms on Zoom. We were all in the same building, but in different rooms. And we would have been lost if we hadn't done that run through, because what is obvious to me in the script is not obvious to another person. And so, we had poor Father Tim, do I talk now? Do I talk now? And then somebody else was like, is it my turn? And so that helped us to fine tune the script and fine tune. Jenny ran the tech and did a marvelous job. And she annotated a separate script for herself with all of those, switching between a slide and a video and a person and so forth. So we decided we will always do a run through at least once, because we need that. And then we also had a couple of parishioners and my husband, because he was available during the day. They were our guinea pigs in terms of having an audience, so that it wasn't just us, but someone was actually watching it. And then they were able to give us feedback in the chat, which was very helpful. And then afterwards, we were able to, being on Zoom, we were able to talk about, how did this work? How did it look from your end? And so forth. And so that was very helpful. And I think so far the feedback, the limited feedback we've received from folks has been positive. So it's an immense relief to get that first one done and know that, it wasn't perfect, but it was pretty darn good, and gave us some ideas to improve for October. So that was really helpful. We did, let's see. Yes, we were live on Zoom with a lot of pre-recorded bits, that we prepared ahead of time. And then, but we did record the Zoom and have posted that. And unfortunately, we had a little hesitation at the beginning of the session on Wednesday night in terms of being able to make people co-hosts and so forth. And in that little bit of stress, I forgot to push record on Wednesday. So luckily we had recorded Sunday, because our intent was to share the recording of the one that we thought went better. So there's a blessing in doing it twice. So we posted the recording from Sunday night because I forgot to record Wednesday until we were about done. So, so Jenny, do you want to tell a little bit about October coming up then?
Yeah, so we are frantically getting ready for October. We know those parishes that we're sharing with are waiting for that. So we have a number of things in the hopper, that's the words that they say, in the hopper that should be posted yet this afternoon. So we have Becky's video that will be the adult faith formation presenter for October. Tom Quinlan's gospel reflections are ready to go. So we're getting there on that stuff. The kitchen table faith hopefully will be posted by Friday is our goal, I think, to get most of that up and running. So as Paulette said, we were pretty excited about how it went. So if and most everything from September is posted. So anybody that wants to watch any of that or use any of that is welcome to that too. So is there any questions? I know there's not. Most are on the recording today, but. Okay, we'll send it back to John or Justin, whoever's got.
Yeah, I think afterwards, John, I'll defer to you for kind of a couple bits about kind of how things are going in parishes and whatnot. But I think that was our next piece. And then I'll say something very quickly about NCYC, and then we'll pray.
Well, I'll try and speak quickly so I don't become unstable. I know you worry about me being unstable all the time. So here's a recognition of that. So we're getting some good anecdotal information coming in, but I want to take a little bit of time because your experience is so helpful for others. So want to start and everybody share a little bit about what's going on in your parish, even if you haven't started yet. We're going to kick it off with Barb Hudson, who's already started, and she can share a little bit about what's going on down in Creston. If you could share where you do ministry as well, that would be helpful.
I'm DRE at Holy Spirit Parish in Creston, and we are pretty normal right now, and most everybody has come back for in-home classes or in-school classes. We do use the St. Malachy School, which is just a little bit of an obstacle for us because we have to clean up right away when we're done so that the school kids can come in and have a safe place to be. We do seating charts. That was suggested, and it was something we had already looked at, but the school has to do them, and they're going to do their seating charts in their trimester and keep it the same. And that's in case the CDC calls and says that there's been an outbreak, then we know who has been seated in that spot on Wednesday night. And so that way, if there's an outbreak at St. Malachy School, then we know. We only have one class that was too big to house inside St. Malachy School, and we're doing that in the parish basement. We have 30 freshman confirmation kids, and so we do that in the parish basement. So we're able to have them social distanced and be pretty normal. But like I said, almost everybody has come back, and everything's going great right now.
Good. Thank you, Barb. Quick question. Do you have volunteers to help you with the cleanup, like nights or other people, parents?
No, well, yes and no. The teachers help, the kids help. Hey, they're trained at school. They're all back to going to school, and I had the 7th and 8th grade class the very first night, and they're like, do we need to clean our desks? And it's like, well, yes, you do. So, the disinfectant rags went out, and they're 7th and 8th grade, they're changing classes in middle school. So after every class, they wiped things down, and they did an excellent job. They did way better than I thought they would do, because I figured I would just do it again. We are dismissing about 5 to 10 minutes earlier because we don't want the kids late getting home any later than they are. So we dismiss and we meet in the hallways, and we're kind of doing a pickup system that's kind of like a drive-by system, so that they're not just all standing outside the front and gathering. So they're kind of in line, social distanced. Then the teachers go through and wipe everything down. And then I come through with a sanitizer spray like they'd use in the kitchens and spray everything down again. it's always been the habit when you use the school building that you put up the chairs so that everybody's chairs up, just like the janitor had cleaned. But we're leaving the chairs down so that the teachers know exactly what desk we've used. And then that way, if anybody feels like it or if things don't look right, the teacher that uses the classroom the next morning can wipe it down again. And they know exactly which desks we've used. So just another precautionary thing. But the spray sanitizer seems to be working well.
Good.
I go back and clean the church the next day. Our staff, we don't have a lot of extra staff. And you know, any of your cleaning staff right now is working a lot harder than they have. So we're just picking up the slack.
Good. Well, some great suggestions from Barb. Thank you. Thank you for all you're doing. We're going to move over to one of our youth ministers, Christy Pellets from St. Francis of Assisi. So Christy, what's happening in your neck of the woods?
Well, we're going to start our faith formation program in October. We're calling ours Together in Faith, and we're adjusting it to fit our parish needs. So we're using bits and pieces of the St. John and Paul model. So we've been working on that for the last 2 months now. Confirmation prep will start in October too. We're doing some in-person, some in-house, and then some virtual. So we're doing all those kind of options. But we're just kind of staying busy with all that. So that's enough to keep everybody going.
Well, thank you, Christy. And we look forward to your insights, especially in youth ministry, as we continue. So thank you. Let's move to Jane Ann Pachechka.
So this weekend, we are celebrating First Communion, postponed from May. Yay, I know, I'm super excited for the kids. We've had a few individual families have reception, but this is for the bulk of the students. We also are starting our parish-wide faith formation program October 7th in October. And what we have decided to do is to start online using Zoom. And then as the year progresses, we'll reevaluate if we feel comfortable gathering in person. For us, with a school here, and knowing we have students from a wide variety of school districts, let alone buildings, at least I didn't feel comfortable mixing those bodies and germs and so forth until we could assure our nighttime families that even what was happening during the day was working as far as sanitizing and so forth. So we will see how that goes. I also have some catechists who, although willing to come in person, should not for health reasons. So that was another factor. We're going to use the materials we have in the past, which is, I'm going blank, but anyway, those materials, and this year they're going to be consumable. So students will have a package of their book and other supplies that they'll need throughout the year. And then the thought is each month or maybe every couple of weeks, we'll have materials that the catechists need them to have to do the classwork once they're together. Back to Zoom, we will gather as one body on Zoom for opening prayer, greeting, and then each class will go into its own Zoom room. And I'm excited about that because it allows me to more easily visit each and every room. And I've participated in that type of experience, but I haven't managed that type of experience. So the catechists and I are going to have a little trial coming up after communion and make sure we have the bugs worked out as best we can, you know, right? So practice, practice, practice. Yes, thank you. And even then, who knows when you're internet's going to go down, or it's running slow, or we lose a family. I mean, that's just how it is, and I'm okay with that. I do anticipate, especially for our younger grades, that the class time will not go as long as it did when we were in person. And we had a couple Zoom sessions with second graders, now third graders rather, preparing, reviewing for First Communion. And you could just see as the evening progressed, you know, how much more, what did they call it? What was that called? You know, the fidgeting, stemming, you know, increased. So I'll leave that to the catechist to have an eye on their students' needs, and if they need to dismiss earlier, that's totally good. I hope parents will be with their children and participating as far as helping their child with any hands-on activities or clarifying a point. Anyway, that's it. Thanks.
Well, good. Thank you, Jane Ann. The big thing for breakout rooms is to have them organized ahead of time. So all you have to do is hit the breakout, and that let them know they have to use that email that you are putting in. So if they have a Gmail account, but for whatever reason they're using an Outlook account, you'll have to then do it manually, which is not hard. So what you do is you figure out what room they're in and then send them that direction. The hard part's going to be if you've got multiple age groups. So kind of keep that in mind. So if you've got a family that has a second grader and a fourth grader and a seventh grader, they will probably be using the same email. So if they can have separate emails, that would be awesome. So great. Thank you, Jane Ann. We're going to move over to see if Wilma is still on with us. Wilma is from Council Bluffs and from Corpus Christi, so I'm not sure if she's on. She's also the parish secretary. Oh, there goes her box. So I'm going to turn it over to Wilma.
Hi.
Hi, Wilma. So what's going on out in your parish community right now?
Tonight we are getting ready to have a kickoff mass for faith formation.
Great. And then you're doing a family faith formation process as well. Is that correct?
Yes, we're doing a family catechesis.
Is that with oh gosh, its name jumps out at me.
With Sophia Institute?
Yep. Okay. Very good. So how often are they coming for family faith formation per month? Family, is it once a month?
Yes, it would be once a month for the family and then once a month for an adult learning.
Okay, good. And then during that adult learning, do you break open the take-home packets?
Yes, they actually have a parent guide and a student activity book that will help the parents with teaching their children throughout the month.
Great. Good. Well, thank you, Wilma. When do you start this? So the mass is tonight, but then when do you start the actual process?
We will have an adult meeting on September 30th.
Okay.
And then on Sunday, October 4th is when we'll have our first family catechesis.
Great. Thank you, Wilma. And if you've not ever been out to Corpus Christi, they have one of the larger parish halls in our diocese. So it's really quite extraordinary. It might even be bigger than the Pastoral Center first floor space. So excellent. Well, thank you, Wilma.
Oh, you're welcome.
We're going to move over to, I think we're going to do our last two people who are fairly new, Alyssa, who you met last time, and David Rising, who's at St. Luke Parish in Ankeny. And so we'll start with Alyssa and see what's going on, and then we'll switch over to David, and anybody that can help David with any questions. This is a great group to to reach out to. But Alyssa, let's start with you.
Absolutely. So we're excited. We're going to be starting up classes and information again starting October 4th. We're also starting to see more coming back to Mass, which is exciting, slowly but surely. We're also starting RCIA October 1st and looking to set up several Bible studies kind of to start in mid-October as well. That being said, our kind of new process we're looking to use is kind of a website to keep parents in the loop with either home activities and in-person activities, as we're trying to utilize a hybrid plan where we'll have students kind of split up by last name. So one week A through K will come, the next week L through Z will come. So I think by having those resources all online for parents to utilize as well, it's going to make things a lot more user-friendly and a bit more efficient as well around communication. And then I think the only other thing that's new, so we're between two different school districts, and one district has 13 cases of COVID and the other has no cases. So we're looking pretty good so far, COVID-wise, which is exciting. So we're just gonna start off in October and see where we go.
Great. Thank you, Alyssa. You know, one thing, and I'll have more stuff in this afternoon's Growing Disciples newsletter, but one thing to keep in mind is COVID may not affect your parish program per se. Let's say you've got a parent or an older sibling who's not involved, but because of quarantining, all of a sudden, that's going to actually affect your process. So kind of keep that in mind. What can you do for families who have to miss because someone is quarantined who isn't themselves COVID positive? So that's something we'll be looking at. We'll also be looking at a simple diocesan-wide contact tracing so that we can also help. And I mean really, really simple. That is, we're still designing it, but it's basically only if you have a case would you report it in your parish community. And you'll kind of see it's split out with adults and possible staff, and then also children and teens. So kind of keep that in mind, but that will help us kind of take a look and see what is the diocese doing as we continue into fall programming. And not only cold and flu, but cold and flu season will be rearing its ugly head as well. So thank you for that. And any suggestions, Justin, Patty, and Sherry and I really appreciate it. You can't believe how much we've learned because of your practical good sense as we've had consultations and conversations. So keep them coming. It's really appreciated. So we're going to turn it over to one of our new people, David Rising. David, if you recognize the last name, his brother is our pastor down in Osceola and a couple of other parishes, but was up in Perry and at Our Lady of the Americas as well. So Father Chris is, I can't even remember how long he's been a pastor, but David is, I think you said 2 weeks, but we're going to turn it over to him to say hello and see what's going on up at St. Luke's.
Yeah, so it's about 2 weeks, and yeah, it's like drinking from a fire hose. So when I got here, they wanted to start classes today. Obviously, I kind of pushed that back since I didn't have any catechists lined up. So I pushed it back to next week, and thankfully we've got majority of the catechists lined up. We're doing both in-person and virtual classes. So just, again, another push for more catechists. So yeah, lots of work. I've got a meeting with my catechist this evening here just to go over everything, try to get everyone on the same page and say, okay, we do what we can, and everybody can take a breath, relax. If anything goes wrong, just blame it on COVID, right?
You know, David, there's a lot of wisdom there. One of the things I've shared with seasoned catechetical leaders, I was just having a conversation yesterday with Teresa Romans, who's down at Holy Rosary in Glenwood. And I don't know if Barb and Paulette can also testify to this, but whether you've been with faith formation for decades or you're just launching into this, we're all kind of on the same page. This is something we haven't experienced. So this is a time to break the rules and to try something different and go out into the deep and see what works. I again am very pleased, even if people are not necessarily heading into family faith formation full time, the amount of resourcing that is going to families is incredibly important. So thank you, David, for saying yes. And we look forward to pastorally accompanying you and you accompanying us for many years to come.
Sounds good. Thank you.
So I'm going to turn it back over to Justin, but I want to thank you for your leadership. Thank you for everything that you do for the faithful of Southwest Iowa. And just know again, if you need anything, even if it's just a listening ear with no recommendations, no, well, have you tried this? Just that listening ear, Justin, myself, Patty, and Sherry are here for you. So I'm going to turn it back over to Justin now. And again, thank you so much for being with us today and hearing about Charlene and the good work that the National Catholic Partnership on Disability integrates throughout the entire church.
All right, so I was just going to say a few things about NCYC because they just, I think earlier this week, sent out one of their connected newsletters where they mentioned that they've decided to go ahead and continue with planning as usual. I'm sure there will be, pretty dramatic differences to how it's run and whatnot, but they said it won't be until probably about November where we get specifics. But for our sake, we're going to start putting together a number of planning things based on what we do know and try to get those out as soon as possible so that we can be as ready as possible for whatever sort of curveballs NFCYM ends up throwing us as far as changes to NCYC and how the whole process beforehand will run and after. And so for those of you who have taken groups to NCYC before, it is definitely not just in November, right? It kind of takes up a whole lot of brain space for a solid year ahead of time. And so that's where I'll be trying to get a little bit ahead of that and get you some stuff later this month, as well as throughout October to hopefully make this a whole smooth process. That's really kind of all I have at this point as far as details to share out, but I wanted to let you know very much on the radar, and I'll be in communication soon with kind of some more details for that. But at least for now, they're planning on hosting it in Indianapolis as planned. I forget the dates. I want to say it's November 18th to 20th or something along those lines. I'll double check, of course, but I'll get that for you. With that, I think we can go ahead and close in prayer. So let's go ahead and begin in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for the opportunity to gather together this morning. Thank you for all of the wonderful individuals who have stepped forward to lead your faithful and to gather the lost sheep. We pray for the strength and courage and insight to continue on that path in uncertain times. We trust that all of our efforts, when laid at the feet of your cross, will come to bear fruit. And we pray together as your Son taught us to pray and to lift all things to you. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. All right, well, thank you again, everybody.